Order, order. Gregory Stafford to move the motion.
I'm going to move that this House has considered the impact of alcohol duty on the UK wine sector. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Mr Turner, and I'm grateful to colleagues for attending this evening's debate. A bit of background and heritage. The United Kingdom has long been a global hub for beers, wines and spirits, dating back to 1638 with the founding of Berry Brothers and Rudd. We are the largest exporter of spirits in the world and the second largest importer of wine by both volume and value. The sector represents some of the very best of British enterprise, from heritage distillers to pioneering new producers who continue to innovate and support our economy. Behind every bottle on the shelf is a small family business, a logistics worker, or a hospitality employee whose livelihood depends on this trade. Each year, the United Kingdom imports the equivalent of 1.7 billion bottles of wine, accounting for 99% of all wine consumed here. This vibrant culture of responsible enjoyment sustains our high streets, supports independent retailers, and provides essential income for pubs and restaurants that continue to face difficult trading conditions. In 2024, over £12 billion was paid to the Treasury in alcohol duty, with wines and spirits contributing £8.5 billion, around 70% of that total. The wider wine and spirits sector generated more than £76 billion in economic activity in 2022, supported £22 billion in gross value added, and sustained over 400,000 jobs. But when over 60% of the cost of a bottle of wine is tax, we must ask who is truly being squeezed, the consumer, the publican, or the common sense of good economic policy. The reality is that the margins for producers and retailers are tightening. There is a limit to what the British public are willing to pay before they simply choose to stay at home. Changes in duty directly alter prices on the shelf and on restaurant wine lists. Every percentage point of duty may appear small in Whitehall, but for many businesses, it is the difference between survival and closure. Treasury Wine Estates, the producer of brands such as 19 Crimes and Penfolds, has warned that further tax increases will deepen pressure on hospitality. Their managing director of global premium brands, Angus Lilly, stated that higher costs mean tougher choices for local pubs, higher prices for consumers, and less money circulating through the hospitality sector that keeps our towns and cities vibrant. A recent YouGov poll commissioned by the Wine and Spirit Trade Association found that 1 in 4 regular drinkers will buy less alcohol from shops if prices continue to rise, and 2 in 5 will reduce their consumption in pubs and restaurants. In my constituency, we have excellent local brewers such as Tilford and Kilnside, and craft distillers such as Hogmore Distillery, whose team I had the pleasure of visiting recently and sampling their locally made spirits. These are small, creative producers who bring jobs, pride and flavour to their communities. But they will not survive if the alcohol industry continues to face relentless pressure from government policy that fails to support its long-term sustainability. If we price people out of the pub, we do not just lose the sale, we lose the cornerstone of British community life. Now, turning to the current picture, sales data illustrates the scale of the problem. In the 12 weeks to mid-June this year, volume sales for wine were down by 3% in the off-trade, rising to 5% for spirits. The picture in the on-trade is even more severe, with wine volumes down by 7% and spirits by 8%. Hospitality has been one of the hardest hit sectors of the economy since the budget, accounting for nearly half of all job losses. We are now taxing our way to lower revenues. This is not a sound economics, it is in fact counterproductive. As one industry voice put it, Britain is becoming the most taxed place to raise a glass and the hardest place to sell one. Colleagues will recall that in 2023, the UK moved from the inherited EU duty framework to a strength-based system, taxing wine by labelled alcohol by volume in 0.1% increments. Alongside this reform, the headline rate increased in August 2023 and by a further 3.65% in February of this year. For a 14.5% ABV wine, that represents a cumulative increase of around 44% in just 18 months.
And on that point, would you give way?
I'm happy to give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for securing this debate and for giving way. On the point of excessive tax inhibiting entrepreneurship, I visited Ned Orty and his family, who run the Oakley Vineyard in my constituency in Cannington. And they pointed out to me that it is perverse that in the United Kingdom, We have a duty relief scheme for small brewers and distillers, but we have no similar scheme for small vineyards. And I wonder if my honourable friend would agree with me that a small duty relief scheme for small producers would help English wine producers, and we could all raise a glass to that.
My honourable friend makes an absolutely correct point, and indeed preempts something I was going to say later on about the inconsistencies and unfairness of the current system. I think the current small producer relief is capped at 8.5%, and I do think the government should look at what it can do for those smaller producers that he mentions. Now, the Taxpayers Alliance has highlighted that the UK has the third highest wine duty in the world, now at £2.44 per bottle, an increase of 9% since 2023. By comparison, France charges the equivalent of just 2 pence per bottle, Romania 1 pence, and Spain applies no excise duty at all. In fact, half of the EU's 27 member states do not charge duty on wine whatsoever. And when neighbouring countries impose far lower rates, our competitiveness suffers. We pride ourselves on being a global trading nation, yet we've priced ourselves out of the very markets we helped to create. Labour's current approach, I think, is short-sighted and self-defeating, taxing ambition, throttling innovation and penalising productivity. The Treasury cannot build growth by breaking the back of the very industries that deliver it. As Winston Churchill put in 1904, you cannot tax your way to prosperity any more than you can drink your way to sobriety. Turning to what my honourable friend just mentioned, the inconsistencies and unfairness in the system, products between 8.5 and 22% ABV are taxed at the same rate per litre of pure alcohol, yet beer between 3.5 and 8.4% ABV pays more than twice as much duty as cider of the same strength. Small producer relief, while welcome in principle, is capped at 8.5% ABV and therefore excludes virtually all winemakers and distillers. This policy fails to support small English wineries such as Chapel Down in the constituency of my honourable friend for the Weald of Kent, Nye Timber or Camel Valley, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, which contribute to rural employment and agricultural production. I will.
Honourable member for giving way, and he's making a fantastic speech. I agree with everything he's saying. On the small wine producers, West Dorset is blessed with 11 fantastic small vineyards. For most of them, the primary route to market is through local shops and rural pubs. And does he agree with me that unless we raise the threshold to create equality in the marketplace or a fairer system alongside small producers of beer, these small vineyards will never have a chance to grow beyond that small area?
I agree with the honourable gentleman entirely. I think it makes very little sense to design a system that essentially punishes small English wineries for doing precisely what we want, namely innovating, employing and exporting. What we need is a tax framework that supports the makers, not merely those who take. And there's a revenue reality to this as well, Mr Turner. Between April and September of this year, receipts from alcohol duty were £300 million lower than during the same period in 2024. And if this trend continues, the Treasury will collect around £1 billion less than forecast by the Office of Budget Responsibility. We've reached the wrong side of the Laffer curve, where higher duties result in lower total receipts. The Treasury cannot continue to draw from the same barrel and expect it to refill itself. That should give the Chancellor and the Minister and Treasury officials pause for serious reflection. With the autumn budget approaching, I would be grateful, therefore, if the Minister could address 3 areas of concern. First, whether the government has undertaken or will undertake a full assessment of the impact of successive duty increases on consumer prices, business sustainability and overall tax receipts. Second, whether the forthcoming 3-year review of the duty system will consider whether the current tax by ABV model is appropriate for wine, a product whose alcohol content varies naturally with climatic conditions. Third, whether the government will revisit the structure of small producer relief so that it more fairly supports genuinely small-scale producers, including English winemakers and craft distillers, in line with the original policy intent. And finally, whether the Treasury will review the cumulative impact of wider regulatory costs, such as the extended producer responsibility packaging levy, business rates changes, and other compliance burdens, to ensure that these do not disproportionately harm low-margin businesses within the sector. Before I come to a close, Mr Turner, I would like to thank the Wine and Spirit Trade Association and Treasury Wine Estates, whose compelling evidence show a sector under extreme pressure, a tax system that is internationally uncompetitive, an approach that risks delivering diminished returns to the Exchequer. When consumers are price sensitive, when hospitality is struggling, and when revenues are falling despite higher rates, it is right to ask whether the system remains fit for purpose. The objective must be a framework that is fair between product categories, proportionate in its impact, and effective in raising the revenue upon which our public services depend. The UK's wine and spirit sector is one of our quiet economic strengths. It deserves a regulatory environment that allows it to thrive, to invest, and to continue contributing to communities and to the Treasury alike. This government should remember, a thriving economy fills the exchequer, a suffocated one drains it. I look forward to hearing the Minister's response and, in particular, how the government intends to support the stability, competitiveness and long-term sustainability of this vital industry.
This House has considered impact of alcohol duty on the UK wine sector. Dr. Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Mr Turner. What a pleasure it is to serve under you this evening. And I do want to thank the member for Farnham and Borden for introducing this debate so ably, actually, and there's much I agree with what he said. He did present a number of questions for the Minister around the operation of alcohol duty. And I think one of the questions that was perhaps missing was around the health impacts of having the wrong level of alcohol duty in the UK. And that's part of what I want to touch on my speech. So in my life, the English wine has moved from a feature of jokes on sitcoms to a premium product, both in terms of price sometimes, but also its quality, more importantly. And I'm pleased to see that Scotland's wine industry is also growing. In 2025 so far, 5 new vineyards have registered with the Food Standards Scotland, and I hope this industry will continue to flourish and grow. I also have to say I'm proud to have the North British Distillery, one of Scotland's oldest and largest Scotch grain whisky producers, in my constituency. I'd be in trouble if I didn't mention them. And I do hope that any consideration to changes on alcohol duty consider the whole of the industry in the UK rather than just one part of it. So as much as I want to see these industries thrive, and I absolutely do, we have to do that whilst being conscious of the public health implications that alcohol can have. It's our responsibility to find the right balance with an alcohol duty that works for businesses, as we've heard, but also supports public health. We need an alcohol duty system that works for our wine industry and also supports the hospitality sector and improves public health. So I want to talk about informed moderation when it comes to drinking. I'm not here to lecture anyone. I enjoy a drink like everybody else, but I'm a real advocate of people being aware of some of the implications of consuming alcohol. So I'm concerned about 4 things, really. I think that drinks are getting stronger, and that's certainly been the case in my lifetime. And I think sometimes that's to the detriment of the taste of some wines. We are drinking more at home post-COVID, and that has real health implications. And I have to also say, Chair, I'm eating more crisps at home as well post-COVID. It's a serious point, actually. Our hospitality industry is under huge pressure, and this impacts on the vibrancy of our high streets. And we have a duty to ensure public are aware of the risks of drinking. So I recently met with the Scottish Health Action on Alcohol Problems. They told me that in Scotland in 2024, there were a total of 1,185 alcohol-specific deaths registered. This was the lowest number registered since 2019, something we should celebrate. And it's perhaps, at least in part, due to minimum unit pricing of alcohol in Scotland. But it still shows the damage that excessive alcohol consumption can do, and that it remains too high in Scotland and elsewhere. So by choosing to consume lower strength alcohol, we can continue to enjoy drinking and the benefits it does bring to us in social occasions, whilst also addressing the harms that are caused by alcohol. And I do welcome the fact that the government is looking quite seriously to meet its commitment to label alcohol, just like we did with cigarettes in the past as a country, to make people more aware of some of the risks that come with drinking. For example, the World Cancer Research Fund told me that alcohol-related breast cancer can be caused even by low levels of consumption of high-strength alcoholic drinks. Reducing the strength of alcoholic drinks can reduce the likelihood of this type of cancer. I have to say, Mr Turner, they told me about this at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. Not the best place to give people advice on drinking a little bit less. So this is why I feel a well-designed minimum unit pricing system across the UK is worth considering alongside a meaningful and well-structured alcohol duty regime. But I understand some of the concerns people have about minimum unit pricing of alcohol. And many people, activists in the sector, look back to when Alistair Darling was Chancellor in the UK and the changes he made to the alcohol duty regime and how it directly related to improved health outcomes for people. And I think that is something we can learn from. I'm always proud to say I followed him, although there was somebody between us as MP for Edinburgh South West. Alongside an effective duty system, it is also right that we encourage drinking in as safe an environment as possible while supporting our hospitality industry. So during a meeting with the Institute of Alcohol Studies last month, they told me that freezes on alcohol duty disproportionately benefit the sales of alcohol in shops, allowing supermarkets to maintain lower prices in comparison with hospitality venues. And this is what is at the heart of so many pubs feeling the stress, because it's just so much cheaper for people to drink at home than it is compared to pubs and other venues. And hospitality is a massive employer in the UK, which is under huge stress just now. And I do think we have to look at how we look at taxation of alcohol right across the board to make sure we're benefiting that sector whilst also reducing harmful drinking at home. An effective alcohol duty can support many of these jobs by closing the gap between the prices in pubs and supermarkets. This in turn encourages people to drink, hopefully British-produced alcohol publicly, which is far safer than consumption in private. So in conclusion, Mr Turner, it is right that we take time to thoroughly consider alcohol duty system and make sure it works for our wine industry and also people like the North British Distillery in my constituency. But we also have to see this debate as an opportunity to support the hospitality sector and improve public health. These are three really important things, and I don't envy the Ministry's job in trying to reach a balance between them. Thank you.
Lamb.
Thank you, Mr Turner. I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Farnham and Borden, for giving us an opportunity to discuss this very important topic that affects so many people and businesses in the Weald of Kent, which proudly produces some of the finest wines in the country. The principle of taxing alcohol by strength may make sense in theory, but wine is an agricultural product. Its strength can't be engineered to order, but instead varies naturally with climate and vintage. A system designed for factory production simply does not work for vineyards rooted in the soil. Sadly, our wine businesses have faced steep duty increases, ever more paperwork, and as a result, mounting costs across the board. In the Weald of Kent, small vineyards, often family-run and started from scratch, are grappling not just with higher duties, but with higher labour costs, greater packaging charges, and yet more red tape. In May this year, I wrote to the Minister's predecessor to raise my concerns about the impact of alcohol duty on the wine industry. In his reply, he said that producers below 8.5% ABV could claim draft relief and small producer relief. This is true, but almost no wine sits below 8.5% strength. So might the Minister be able to tell us, please, how many UK wineries actually claimed either relief last year? He also said, happily.
Like her, as a South East MP, I have some amazing vineyards in mid-Sussex, like Bolney Wine Estate and the Olborn Wine Estate. And they've told me about the challenges of that 8.5% cap that she's so articulately setting out. But it strikes me that it was the previous Conservative government that brought in that cap. Do you think current members of the Conservative Party regret that decision in 2022?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Well, I thank the member for her intervention, the honourable member. It's not for me to speak for them, but I think that it is reasonable to say the system that we have, I don't think works very well, and I don't think that it would be right to pretend otherwise on behalf of my constituents who have to deal with it every day. The Minister's predecessor, whom I wrote to before, also said that the new system benefits lower strength wines, including many British wines. But since February, overall rates have risen. So I wonder also whether the Minister might be able to tell us what share of English wines are paying less or more duty now than under the previous system. And finally, the previous Minister said that reforms would strengthen the tax base. Yet, as far as I can see, between April and September, alcohol duty receipts were almost £300 million lower than the same period last year, despite the rates rise. So it would also be very useful if the Minister might be able to explain that. Duty on a 14.5% ABV wine is now almost half as much again as it was in August 2023. As my honourable friend rightly points out, well over half the shelf price of a bottle of wine is now tax. In France, the equivalent duty is a few euro cents, and in Spain, it is nothing at all. The reality is that this duty system, combined with the general tax rises in the last budget, is putting businesses at risk. Could the Minister please rule out any further duty increases in the upcoming budget? Countless small producers in the Weald of Kent and about 1,000 independent merchants across England are already struggling under the weight of new bureaucracy and tax pressures. Winemaking is not an exact science. As I mentioned earlier, alcohol strength fluctuates from year to year, and small differences can double a producer's duty bill. Large multinational producers may be able to absorb that. Small family wineries cannot. They can't dial down their ABV without changing the taste or quality of the product. You can't dilute wine without destroying it. These are new entrepreneurial businesses built on enormous risk and long-term investment. Many vineyards in the Weald have put everything they have into buying land, planting vines, and waiting years before their first sale. In my constituency, we are proud to host many of Britain's leading wineries: Chapeldown, Gusbourne, Balfour, Biddenden, Westwell, Woodchurch, Domaine Evremont, the list goes on. They bring visitors, jobs, and pride to the Weald, and it is an utter pleasure to visit them all. But we're also home to small startups, like the husband and wife team I met last month in Ham Street, taking a leap of faith into the sector. If it's tough for the big names, it's tougher still for the small ones. Now they face not just duty increases, but rising national insurance costs, higher minimum wages, an end to flexible employment contracts, changes to inheritance tax relief, and packaging fees that penalise glass, which is the only viable material for quality sparkling wine. When I last raised the broader issue of wine in England, I asked the Minister's DEFRA colleague whether he would support the sector's call for targeted help, and he said it was a matter for the Treasury. So I say to the Minister today, please look again. I know that he did not create the duty framework, but my honourable friend is right. We do seem to have reached the tipping point at which our taxation system is so complex and so onerous that it is collecting less money than a simpler, lower rate system would. And please, if he could, it would be great to hear what plans he has to support such an exciting and dynamic industry, creating jobs and amazing export opportunities in rural parts of the country, like my home, the Weald of Kent.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under you, and I thank the member for Farnham and Borden for securing this important debate. I was delighted that he broadened his comments beyond the wine industry, because, of course, the lessons that we can learn from the whisky industry will apply to the burgeoning wine industry as well. And I also acknowledge the contribution from the member for Edinburgh South West. I agree with many of his comments about the health implications, but I also acknowledge that for once a Scottish Labour MP is praising the Scottish Government rather than criticising it. Now, the impact of alcohol duty is being felt far beyond the UK wine sector, critically affecting the nation's biggest food and drink export, Scotch whisky. Despite its proven value to the economy, supporting over 66,000 jobs across the country and having an export value worth $5.4 billion last year, this industry now stands under mounting threat, one created by current government policy. In just 2 years, Scotch whisky has faced a 14% increase in duty, meaning that 70% of an average bottle of whisky represents tax alone. On top of that, producers are under immense pressure from other rising input costs, higher employment expenses, and global market pressures, including damaging US tariffs that threaten stability and market share. Despite this, the expected revenues from duty increases have also failed to materialise. Perversely, while we know the government wants to put growth at the heart of its strategy, last year's falling revenues show that excessive taxation is hurting both the industry and the Treasury, and this will apply to the growing wine sector in this country. I expect that's partly to do with climate change, although I don't expect that my own constituency in the north of Aberdeenshire will see any vineyards in the near future. The Scotch Whisky Association has rightly described the current excise duty system as broken. It is now up to the Chancellor to create a stable and supportive environment for the industry by freezing excise duty. With more than 1,000 jobs lost since the last budget, it is time for the Government to recognise the counterproductive nature of this policy and set it right in the upcoming autumn budget. Significant progress is being made in Scotland as discussions between the First Minister and President Trump during his state visit highlighted the potential for a trade deal that would strengthen ties between the US whisky and Scotch whisky industries. The Chancellor must now show the same commitment by prioritising the Scotch whisky sector and recognising that supporting its growth means maintaining the duty freeze to allow for this world-renowned industry to thrive and hopefully the wine sector as well. Thank you, Chair.
Spokesperson Charlie Maynard.
Thank you, Mr Turner. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I thank the member for Farnham and Borden for bringing this very important debate. It's much appreciated. The overall logic of more alcohol resulting in more tax makes sense, and the taxation of wine needs to be stable, fair and workable. And this principle has to work in practice, and we're completely failing on that in the current system, and we really need to fix it as soon as possible. So just to recap, before August 2023, in line with EU regulation, wine duty was predominantly charged according to volume, rather than how much alcohol the product contained. In August 23, the Finance Bill, a new duty system was introduced that required all products to pay duty according to strength. In the 31st of January 2025, wines of strength between 11.5% and 14.5% ABV were taxed as if their strength was withdrawn on the 1st of February 2025. Therefore, 85% of all wine sold in the UK is subject to the same rate of duty. Under this new system, this has been replaced by 30 different rates based on ABV at 0.1% increments. This is extraordinary. It makes sense if you're dealing with vodka, which you distill, or beer, which you brew, where you can perfectly and precisely decide how much alcohol is in that. It makes absolutely no sense with an agricultural product like wine, where your bottle of wine in one season will have more alcohol in it than the next season. And when you're dealing with these microscopic increments, you're really in trouble. And you're in trouble whether that's a domestic producer, whether that's a foreign producer, or whether it's a retailer here in this country, because every single one of those bottles needs to be measured, calibrated, and then you have to put the price on and tax accordingly. The administrative burden for that is absolutely horrendous. And I hear this from Ollie Gauntlet, who's the head of Ensham Cellars, a loyal constituent, thank you. The Oxford Wine Company, which is a wonderful wine company that serves Oxfordshire, and they have had an enormous admin trouble dealing with this. And we hear it from Majestic Wine, which also has a shop in Witney. And I think that the single best reason to change this is what so many people have said already, which is it's not working. We've got £300 million less excise duty as a result of this. And if that's kind of one way to kind of tickle the Treasury into a sensible decision, you know, I can't think of a better one. And we've got... Certainly.
I thank my friend for giving way. Would he agree with me? Would he agree with me that this is a policy which directly hits the small independent wine importers like the Wine Loft in Brixham, who are bringing in, selling lots of different kinds of wine, and they don't have the power of Sainsbury's or Majestic and a whole department who can manage it and who are bringing in large quantities of the same wine?
I 100% agree, and that's a great illustration of just how painful it is and how unnecessary it is. I mean, this is not benefiting anybody. Not even HMRC. And that's, you know, that's the point I really want to make here. It's like, we've got the budget very, very soon. Bluntly, and I don't want to kind of stick the knife in too much into my Conservative colleagues, but it was mad. I mean, overall, I think the reforms were quite sensible in terms of taxing. You know, it's more alcohol, more money, yeah? But when it comes to wine, it was obviously mad. And we're kind of depressed, and I'm going to be an equal opportunity knife sticker, in that, you know, why did Labour follow a mad Tory policy, a bit like why follow a mad hard Brexit? You know, pull out, blame them, and change the policy back to something sensible, make more tax, and keep this sector, whether it's growers in the UK or whether it's retailers in the UK, put them back on their feet, please.
Opposition spokesperson, Mr. Wilde.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turner. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair. Once again, I congratulate my honourable friend for Farnham and Borden for bringing forward this important debate. He is a man who, in Blair's immortal words, knows his claret from his Beaujolais, but I won't have anyone say he is a charmless man. And it's a pleasure to speak in support of an industry that is doing well in this country, but also is facing some challenges. And it's a homegrown success story with over 1,000 vineyards and nearly 5,000 hectares under vines across the country. In my own northwest Norfolk constituency, I'm fortunate to have wineries including the award-winning Burn Valley and Cobble Hill, who are contributing to the local economy, supporting tourism and creating jobs. And the wine and spirit industry contributed £76 billion in economic activity last year, with nearly half of that coming from the wine sector. And yet, despite the success, the government is putting more burdens onto the sector. But it has been a good debate with contributions from my honourable friend, I think, wins the prize for the number of wineries in her constituency. The member for Edinburgh South West made some important points about public health. The honourable member for Witney, unfortunately, he couldn't not mention Brexit. I mean, he seems slightly obsessed, but anyway. And the domestic sector is largely made up of small producers, with 2/3 producing fewer than 10,000 bottles a year. These are generally family businesses, local employers and passionate entrepreneurs. And employment in the sector has grown significantly over the last few years, and since 2010, bottle sales have increased to over 9 million. And the UK is obviously also a global hub for the trade, as the second largest importer of wine by volume and value. So this is a sector we should be nurturing, not penalising. And when we were in government, that's what we did. We introduced a simplified duty system based on taxing alcohol by strength, with an 18-month easement to help the sector. We encouraged businesses to diversify and move into wine production. Importantly, in the context of this debate, we froze alcohol duty rates in the Autumn Statement 2023, and then we continued that in the Spring Budget of 2024. That is a record of support, but sadly the government has taken a different path. At last year's budget, the government raised the headline rate of alcohol duty by inflation. As we've heard, now around 60% of the cost of a bottle of wine is tax, and Wine GB warn that increases are driving down demand and in turn cutting the revenues to the Treasury. 1 in 4 drinkers say they'll buy less alcohol as a result of the price increases. And let's be clear, producing wine in Britain is not easy. Yields are 30 to 50% lower than in France or Spain. Labour costs are higher, the weather is obviously unpredictable, and input prices keep rising. But instead of backing the sector, the government keeps piling on costs. Alcohol duty up, business rates up, national insurance up. And the impact, as we've heard, the Wine and Spirits Trade Association have pointed out that the revenues from alcohol duty are down £300 million in the first 6 months of this financial year. And if that continues, then the Treasury will be bringing in £1 billion less than forecast by the OBR at the Spring Statement. The government is putting the country on the wrong side of the Laffer curve, not just on alcohol taxes, but across the board. And the Minister is relatively new in post, so I wonder, has he commissioned advice on the impact of duty on the sector? Has he taken a fresh look at the data? Has he looked at the assumptions which the OBR use? If not, will he do that, and will he do that rapidly? Because we on this side of the House are firmly on the side of Britain's wine producers, a vibrant, innovative, homegrown sector that deserves support, not more taxation. And of course, it's not possible to have this debate without talking about the hospitality sector, as a number of colleagues have. Wine is more than a drink, it's about socialising and shared experience. And the sector clearly depends heavily on pubs and restaurants and hotels to introduce consumers to the great British product. But under this government, as so many other sectors, hospitality is struggling. Nearly 90,000 jobs have been lost since the disastrous budget a year ago, and we've seen today the unemployment rate hitting 5%. It's gone up every month under this government. And that's a result of the Chancellor's terrible judgment to make it more expensive to employ people. So with rising employment costs, the jobs tax, the EPR, higher business rates, we see layer upon layer of additional costs. And it's no wonder that UK hospitality has described the government's approach as a hammer blow. Now, the wine sector has put forward some suggestions for the Chancellor and ministers ahead of the budget. First and foremost, reconsidering some of those decisions to increase business taxes, looking at a freeze in excise duty or a wine tourism relief, and a point made by my honourable friend for Bridgewater and echoed by others around the alignment of small producer relief with the realities of the wine industry. These are all practical ideas that are worthy of consideration, so will the Minister commit to look seriously and carefully at all of those? So rather than taxing success, we should be nurturing it. Yeah. The wine sector is a model of sustainable rural growth and it deserves our support. The ask the sector has for the Minister is simple. Will the government work with them, listen to them, look at the evidence and commit to easing the burden on our wine producers? Thank you.
Minister.
Mr. Chairman, I am grateful. I am glad to be serving under your chairmanship today, and I am grateful to the honourable member for Farnham and Borden for securing this important debate and for speaking so eloquently in support of the UK wine sector. It was fantastic to hear from him about the sector's growth and also its continuing export progress, which is a really, really good thing. The irony wasn't lost on me, though, that the honourable member cited that Treasury wine estates are having some reservations about the Treasury's tax policy. I will look into what they may be. I want to heartily echo his praise for the UK wine industry's significant contribution to our economy, culture and tourism. And as he mentioned, the statistics do speak for themselves. We are the world's second largest wine importer, bringing in 1.7 billion bottles in 2024. Sales of both imported and homegrown wine support hundreds of thousands of jobs, particularly in hospitality and in retail. And in recent years, as many members have mentioned, more and more people have taken up work in the UK's domestic wine sector, which is much like a dessert wine, small but strong. Industry figures suggest that more than 1,000 vineyards and 200 wineries contribute to our rural economy, with land under vine growing fivefold since 2005. The member for the Weald of Kent, I think, was mentioned that she had listed many of the wineries in her patch. One of the challenges of being a parliamentary private secretary, as my honourable friend, the member for Hastings and Ryes, is that you don't always get to speak in these debates, but I'm reliably informed by a note that has been passed to me that you may have the same number of vineyards in your constituency, so there may have to be a little Kent-based competition. But it is great to see that the number of homegrown produced products is increasing, with production exceeding 10 million bottles last year and sales rising too. This government is committed to fostering an environment where the wine industry, like its vines, can thrive and grow. The honourable member who has brought the debate this evening raised important points about the UK alcohol duty system, and I know others on the other side of the room have raised those points too. Let me just before I turn to them, let me just acknowledge the government's wider work to support the wine industry through agricultural grants and export promotion. The government has committed at least 200 million to the Farming Innovation Programme through to 2030, and we champion domestically produced wines on the international stage, for instance showcasing English sparkling wine at the Osaka Expo earlier this year. At this point, as I've mentioned English sparkling wine, I think it is important for me to mention the contribution from my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West, who talked about Scotland's growing wine industry and the impact that it and the industry has on high streets. He did also make very important points about making sure that our taxation system does take account of the impact on health of the population when it comes to designing a sensible tax system, and I think that is reflected in the system that we have today. Honourable members have spoken about the previous government's reform to alcohol duty system, and I would note that it is not lost on me that as a Labour MP, I'm stood here defending a alcohol duty system that was implemented by Conservative MPs, and Conservative MPs are opposed to a system that was implemented by their own government. I would say that we, on this side of the House, learnt when we were on the other side that it is not always wise to be opposing the decisions that were made by your party when one's party when one was previously in government. I think one of the reasons we won the last election is because we were able to talk proudly and confidently of the achievements of previous Labour governments. But anyway, it's up to members opposite to choose which aspects of previous government policy they wish to support or not. The alcohol duty system, as others have mentioned, is now based on the principle of taxing alcohol by strength. This means that alcohol duty increases with a product's ABV. And while it is true that some higher strength wines faced increases in duty, this is balanced by reductions in duty for lower ABV wines, including some British wines. Prior to the reforms, both 11% and 14% paid the same duty per bottle. Now there is a difference, 11% paying £2.43 and 14% paying £3.10. I'm interested in the point made by the Honourable Member for the Weald of Kent about the extent to which there are British wine companies that are producing wine that's below 8.5. That's one that I will take away and have a look at after she mentioned that. I was thinking the same thing when I was reading up on this topic earlier today. I do know, though, that the changes that were introduced from industry were introduced with and alongside conversations from industry representatives, and that those conversations will continue as the changes bed in. In recognition of the big changes that were implemented, it is right to assess them after the impacts have had time to take effect, and we've said that will take place at least 3 years from their introduction in 2023. I will be taking that work forward next year with officials from HMRC, and I welcome evidence from members in this chamber, bringing in representations from the businesses and communities that they represent, and of course we'll be engaging with the wine industry. I think in answer to, I'm trying to get to, the Honourable Member for Farnham and Borden said he had 3 points, but I think he had 4 in the end, including the cumulative impact. I'll try to get to all 4 as I go through. On his third point, yes, we will consider in the round all aspects of the current design of the system. I don't want this to be a review that doesn't properly interrogate the design of the system, and I don't want to preempt where we would get to, but in this role, overseeing that review, I do want us to look really carefully at the design of the system as a whole. I do think that it is a sensible system, and I do think it is fair, but I know there are challenges that have been raised by members today. Turning to the big point around cuts or freezers to alcohol duty, look, it is worth realising that that would, of course, come at a cost to the Exchequer. The Office for Budget Responsibility produces the costings for any changes to taxation policy. The member opposite may think that some of their assumptions are wrong. I would encourage members, if they have evidence and facts and figures that they want to put into the OBR on the elasticities, as I believe it is called, when you change a tax rate and the impact on consumption, then do send them in. I and those on this side of the House are confident in the OBR's independence, but of course I will always want to make sure that we as a government are putting forward accurate costings, and I believe in this instance that the OBR is in the right place when it comes to the elasticities, but members should of course feel free to send in their own representations. It is worth noting that freezing alcohol duty this year would, if inflation was at around 4%, would be equivalent to a 3.85% duty cut. Using HMRC's published Ready Reckoner, this would cost the Exchequer roughly £440 million a year. And so I do think it is right that any decision on alcohol duty weighs the impact on overall revenues very carefully. And that is what I'm confident the Chancellor will do as she makes a decision at the budget in just a few short weeks' time. Let me try, Mr. Chairman, in just a few minutes to run through some of the points made by members in the debate. A number of members, the member for Bridgewater, the member for Weald of Kent, and the member for Farnham and Borden, and the spokesperson for the opposition, raised the issue of small producer relief for wine. I would say this question was considered in detail as part of the previous government's review into alcohol duty, and as I've said already, we will look to review this 3 years after the implementation that took place on the 1st of August 2023. We want to gather data and really have a look at the impact of these reforms. So please do, if you want to come forward with proposals for change, please do bring them forward. Of course, I was looking forward to my first intervention. I'll happily give way.
I'm just going to make a plea here, really. I mean, HMRC is losing nearly £1 billion in a year, so that's incredibly bad news for HMRC. And it's massive frictions on business and massive admin costs. Why wouldn't we just go back to the easement? Because, I mean, we can look at this, we can stand looking at this massive problem, or we can just face facts and deal with it and actually get money for the Exchequer. I mean, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thank you for your intervention. Look, we will look in the round at the changes that were implemented in 2023. I don't want to rush to implement something that doesn't work and isn't fair and proportionate and doesn't work for the alcohol industry as a whole. But I understand the points that have been raised today, and they are well made, and I'm here and I've been listening. The Honourable Member for Farnham and Borden also raised the impact of the cumulative impact on the wine industry of various changes that have been made by previous governments, including around packaging and the current government. And look, this does go to a big picture point, which is contested in this place around the tax rises that were implemented in the budget last year. It's my view, it's the view of the Chancellor and of this government, that in the round we had to make those decisions to raise revenue. And yes, I understand that that did lead to additional taxation on businesses. Though on the largest businesses, around half of the smallest businesses with the smallest number of employees aren't paying any additional national insurance as a result of the changes last year. But I do understand that that had an impact on those firms that did have to absorb those additional taxation levels. We think on this side of the House that that was the right decision to make, to be able to raise revenue, to be able to fund our public services and make sure that borrowing wasn't increased more than is sustainable. I do think, I should say at this point, I think it is right for the government to be making sure that we do borrow to invest in the future of this country, something I wish that the previous government had done when interest rates were down at 0.5%. But just on a serious point here, for me as a government minister now with responsibility for taxation policy in the Treasury, I am personally looking really closely at the impact of all the different changes that have been introduced in previous years that do require compliance and burden for business. We've got to look really carefully at them because we want to see businesses growing and thriving, being able to hire more people and grow and expand. Just on business rates specifically, the Chancellor will be coming forward at the budget, as you'll be aware, with the permanently lower multipliers for retail, hospitality and leisure. That was a decision, that was a policy that was set out in our manifesto, and we will be announcing the detail of that at the budget. I've covered some of these points already. I must turn to the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, the MP for Witney. I was glad there was a shout-out for Witney there. That's my hometown. I went to Wood Green School in your constituency. It's a very wonderful part of the world. And yeah, the member for Witney also raised that point around to be honest, one of the challenges of the move to the new system being the additional bands. You know, if you see it on a chart, it's a flat line because it's the same rate, but I am aware that, of course, depending on your ABV, you're at different points on that line, and that is something that producers do have to deal with, and you're right that that is a challenge that maybe falls more in a more challenging way on those who are producing wine and growing products. I do understand that. The point was well made, and there will be a review of this tax 3 years after its implementation. The member for Aberdeenshire North and Moray East mentioned Scotch whisky and the support that was interested in, I think, hearing from me on the support that the government is providing to the industry. And I would say that the industry is set to be one of the biggest beneficiaries from the trade deal with India, which is set to reduce tariffs from 150% to 75% initially, and then to 40% over time. I don't think I got to every single question that members raised, but I do hope, Mr. Chairman and members on all sides, that you feel I've covered the points that were raised. And to conclude, our government is dedicated to supporting the UK wine industry through a range of measures, including making sure that we have an alcohol duty system that's fair and proportionate. And I do want to say that I share the honourable member who brought the debate, and I thank him for doing so. I share his pride in this growing British success story, and I look forward to further discussions, including with Wine GB and the Wine and Spirits Trade Association just tomorrow, in fact, about how we can build a prosperous and sustainable future for UK wine.
Call Gregory Stafford to wind up, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turner. And to have 8 minutes to wind up when usually one gets about 8 seconds in this place to wind up is a luxury that I will indulge to at least to a limit. I don't want to keep honourable members from their wine. I think it's been a fascinating debate with a wide range of issues raised. I think it was wonderful to hear about the wine producers and hospitality industries within people's constituencies, exemplified, I would say, by my honourable friend from the Weald of Kent, who is a doughty advocate, not just for her constituency as a whole, but from what I can see from social media, for her vineyards and producers in her constituency. And every day is a school day, Mr. Chairman. I didn't realise that Scotland produced wine, so I was grateful to the honourable member for Edinburgh South West for raising that and to understand his crisp eating habits as well. He rightly mentions the health implications, and I hope nothing I said in my speech denigrated from that. Where I would like to see is more education, more targeted services, treatment services, and I think those would achieve more than taxing the Shiraz that you have with your Sunday lunch. But he and I may beg to disagree on that. And likewise, we haven't just talked about wine. The honourable member for Aberdeen North and Moray East rightly mentioned the Scotch whisky industry, which is absolutely vital. And the honourable member for Witney, the Lib Dem spokesman, outlined comprehensively how complicated the system is. I was grateful to my honourable friend, the member for North West Norfolk, for mentioning Blur. I think that dates him and me in that. But he was right to outline that the last Conservative government froze duties. And I think that's something the Minister and the government should be considering at the budget. Now, I do feel sorry for the Minister because he probably, I think, perhaps behind the Chancellor, has the worst job in government as the Minister responsible for taxation. But it doesn't have to be this way. He could make everyone very happy at the budget and be one of the first ministers for taxation who actually reduces tax in a Labour government. We shall wait and see. I was pleased, however, to hear that within the 3-year review, the government will be looking at the wider implications and the design of the system, and I think from what he said also, small producer relief. I was, however, slightly disappointed about the way he dismissed the way that tax rises have hit the hospitality industry. 90,000 jobs disappearing since the large budget is an absolute scandal. And if that number of jobs had been lost from a car plant or an oil refinery, we would be having a debate in this House and the government would be stepping in to bail that industry out. Just because it's dispersed across the country, those 90,000 jobs are equally as important. And I do hope the government reconsiders, especially its rises in national insurance, which has hit the industry so hard. I would, though, urge him once again that to review the cumulative burdens that have been placed on the industry, both in terms of tax and regulation. And I do hope that when he has his conversations with the industry tomorrow, and I'm glad that my debate has spurred him to have that meeting, that he listens seriously to their concerns and gives them the relief and response that they seek.
This House has considered impact of alcohol duty on the UK wine sector. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. And of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned. Thank you very much.